Bravo, and this is From the South. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro met with ministers Thursday to evaluate Venezuela's economic recovery plan. In a televised address, President Maduro called the advances made positive and meeting expectations. It's been a month since the plan was launched. Maduro said the new measures will safeguard the national currency and citizens' purchasing power.
Vamos logrando un equilibrio fiscal.
We are reaching economic balance. I can safely say we are on the right path to our goal, which is zero fiscal deficit. We will achieve this faster than we had anticipated. We have reached the goal of completely stopping the issuance of inorganic currency. Every sovereign bolivar in circulation is now sustained by our country's natural resources and on taxes collected.
Our correspondent in Caracas has been out to see how people are dealing with the changes to the currency.
Here in the Venezuelan capital, people seem pleased with the first month of the new currency, the sovereign bolivar. For this analyst, you can feel the difference in the streets.
I think there's more stability and more calm. The fact is that a month and a half or 2 months ago, with the old currency and the old wages, you could buy very little in the street. Now we can see in Sabana Grande and other parts of Caracas, there are more people out in the street. They are buying more, and the whole exchange of goods and services is more dynamic.
People point to the greater supply of cash and the increase in purchasing power.
Before it was chaos. They give you 10,000 bolivars maximum. We suffer from the lack of cash. You couldn't buy a bus fare. But now at least things are moving again.
Shops have adapted to the new money without difficulty.
The difference is we are going back to work like we did years ago. It's easier to deal with the money instead of talking about millions of bolivars. I think it's a lot easier.
The head of the China National Petroleum Company has been in Venezuela to sign agreements. China has backed the new economic measures.
People
are well informed about the economic recovery program, and they have a very positive opinion about it. We signed 28 agreements in China to increase oil production, which Venezuela needs so badly.
The agreements signed with the People's Republic of China included finance to double Venezuela's oil production by August next year, support for basic industries and new mining projects, improvements in the distribution of medicines, and the launching of a new telecom satellite, the Guaycaipura. The aim is to strengthen the economy and overcome the impact of the economic war that Venezuela has suffered for the last 5 years.
More Venezuelan migrants are signing up for the government's return to the Homeland Plan. This Friday, a group of Venezuelans gathered outside their embassy in Ecuador before flying back to Caracas. More than 3,000 Venezuelans have already returned home under the government's initiative, and many more are going to apply. Venezuelan migrants in several Latin American countries say they have suffered from xenophobia and exploitation. On Thursday, over 100 Venezuelan migrants started their own journey back home from Colombia.
Esmeralda Rios and her family signed up to the Return to the Homeland Plan after suffering discrimination and hunger in Colombia.
I would give anything to have never left Venezuela. The life of an immigrant is not easy at all. We are far from home, from our family. I trust in God and that our country's situation will improve.
Her greatest wish is to reunite with her children.
I'm beyond elated to return home and hug my kids, my mom. I miss them so much.
Just like Esmeralda, 140 migrants joined the trip from Bogotá and Bucaramanga. They all have familiar stories of being mistreated and exploited.
Their treatment of us was not kind. We didn't expect to be treated as royalty, but we at least expected to be treated with respect. I worked caring for a 96-year-old woman and her 2 children, and the best I could expect from them was to constantly be yelled at.
Entire families want to go home after being degraded.
My sister got very sick. I never imagined we would live through what we did. We had to sleep under a bridge. Our situation was horrible.
Their excitement grew stronger as night drew closer, knowing that the return was imminent.
Brazilian women are mobilizing for an online and offline combat against the presidential candidate Jair Bolsonaro with the hashtag #NotHim. Protests have been planned in cities around the world to demonstrate anger against his rise in the polls for the upcoming election on the 7th of October. Demonstrators are angry at his offensive statements against women, black people, and the LGBTI community. Prominent Brazilian actresses, journalists, and TV presenters are among the list of women who are campaigning against the right-wing candidate. Jair Bolsonaro is still in hospital after being stabbed while campaigning. He says he hopes to be discharged by the end of the month.
Hello friends, September 21st, Friday. Spring is close. I have never felt so good in life. Thanks to you all. By the end of the month, if God is willing, I will live and we will be together October 7 for a new chapter in our Brazil's life. Together until victory. Thank you.
Bolsonaro wasn't present for Thursday's televised debate between the candidates for Brazil's presidential election. The fight against corruption took center stage in the debate. Candidates also broached other issues, including labor reform and the need to change the political system. Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad pledged to revoke the labor law, which compromises working class rights. Haddad also rejected the freezing of public investment.
The second ethical aspect in politics is to favor the poorest. After health services home from those who do not have homes, the social programs of government should be directed for all, but specifically for those who need them the most. That is why it is important to consider the poorest and fight corruption.
The first-time candidate for the Socialism and Liberty Party and leader of the homeless workers movement, Guilherme Boulos, also spoke about Brazil's inequality.
No family without a house, no workers without food and rights. Social equality essential for any country. Brazil is not only living an economic crisis, not only a political crisis, but it also lives a moral crisis where ethical values are the center that guides politics and life. We have to restore this, not only with words, it is necessary to do so with actions. There is a need for deep political reform in Brazil. We must face the truth that the public power is being held hostage by private interests, which are manifested in electoral campaigns through economic interests, businessmen, bankers, agricultural business, finances, elections, campaigns, and then come to collect favors. That is something we must end.
The Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has met the President of the Dominican Republic, Danilo Medina, to deepen diplomatic ties. Wang Yi arrived in the capital, Santo Domingo, to open the first Chinese embassy in the country. Diplomatic relations were established after the Dominican Republic declared it no longer recognizes Taiwan. Exports to China exceed $2 billion, making it the second largest business partner after the U.S. The Prime Minister of Barbados would like every Barbadian child to speak Mandarin by 2030. Mia Mottley set out her vision as she attended the 67th anniversary of the foundings of the People's Republic of China cocktail party. Her plan is to have the language taught in primary and secondary school, as it's becoming increasingly necessary to have some level of competence in it. Mottley will be working closely with the Chinese government on how to roll out her plans. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. The White House has announced Chilean President Sebastián Piñera will be in Washington, D.C. for an official visit next week. The White House says the leaders will discuss pro-growth policies, combating crime, partnerships in energy and cybersecurity, and the situation in Venezuela. Talks continue in Costa Rica between the government and union leaders on the economic reform bill. Unions agreed to meet politicians after studying the progress of the bill in Congress. The country's Episcopal Conference intervened, forcing the government to reconsider. Workers demand the economic reform be scrapped, as they would raise prices and lower taxes for the rich. There has been a national strike that is now in its second week, which may come to an end, deepening on these discussions. Our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Francia, has more.
On Thursday, labor unions and the government met for 12 hours. The meeting was mediated by the Episcopal Conference. The two sides have not reached an agreement yet, although they have made their positions clear for their next meeting on Friday. These are still preliminary talks with the purpose of discussing the government's proposed economic reform. Labor unions are asking for a repeal of the current plan and that another one be drafted with their input. For their part, the government does not want to totally discard their current plan. This is the second week of a national strike, and it's likely to enter a third week if discussions are not resolved over the weekend.
We thank Fernando for that report. Consensual sex between two men is now legal in Trinidad and Tobago. In an update to April's ruling that the laws criminalizing anal sex were unconstitutional, a judge has introduced the concept of consent to the law. Where consent is present, no law has been broken. Kenyan High Court has temporarily lifted a ban on a film portraying a lesbian love relationship, making it eligible for the Oscars. Titled Rafiki, which means friend in Swahili, the film was banned by the government because they believed it promoted homosexuality and is against the law. The movie can now compete for the Best Foreign Language Film at the Academy Awards. Earlier this year, the film was the first Kenyan movie ever to be premiered at Cannes Film Festival. Homosexuality is illegal in the country. Human traffickers worldwide are increasingly using social media to target teenagers. That's why campaigners in Bolivia are spreading awareness about this worrisome emerging trend. Freddy Morales has the story.
Students and their parents are on the front lines of the campaign. They're hopeful that more young people will come on board the fight, since young women and girls are the main targets.
Kids in schools are also a target. They can attract kids from social media.
We want to stop human trafficking. It is a crime that violates human law.
Bolivia's government enacted a new law in 2012 that prohibits all forms of trafficking and establishes penalties of up to 15 years imprisonment. As a legislative requirement, a national council made up of state, private, and community institutions was set up.
On one hand, we want to raise awareness, and on the other hand, we want to invite people to participate in these events and never let our guards down against such a crime. We know there are organized groups that capture, transfer, and take our children to inappropriate places.
We must take to the streets to defend our children. They have to be safe, and we as parents need to take care of them. Our communities must also safeguard their interests.
According to the UN, human trafficking is a form of slavery that subjects more than 2 million people a year to sexual and labor exploitation. Mafias often use social media to prey on potential victims.
Do not publish personal information on social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or provocative pictures. Do not friend unknown people giving them personal information. These are the ways in which these mafias capture people for human trafficking.
The campaign slogan is, "An informed person is one less victim." Statistics show human trafficking trends in Bolivia. In 2016, there were more than 400 cases. In 2017, 300. And in the first 6 months of this year, 196 cases have been recorded.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. British Prime Minister Theresa May has said no deal is better than a bad deal as Brexit negotiations break down. May was in Austria meeting with European leaders who strongly rejected her plans. She admitted that talks are now at a standstill, adding that the European Union has come up with an alternative.
Yesterday, I was in Salzburg. The first option would involve the UK staying in the European Economic Area and a customs union with the EU. In plain English, this would mean we'd still have to abide by all the EU rules. Uncontrolled immigration from the EU would continue, and we couldn't do trade deals we want with other countries. That would make a mockery of the referendum we had 2 years ago. The second option would be a basic free trade agreement for Great Britain that would introduce checks at the Great Britain-EU border. But even worse, Northern Ireland would effectively remain in the customs union and parts of the single market, permanently separated economically from the rest of the UK by a border down the Irish Sea. Parliament has already unanimously rejected this idea.
Pablo Navarrete has more from London.
A day after being humiliated at a European Union summit in Salzburg, Austria, the British Prime Minister Theresa May has made a statement today on Friday accusing the European Union of not treating the UK with respect. Now, yesterday in Austria at the summit, she was effectively ambushed by French President Emmanuel Macron and EU Council President Donald Tusk, who rubbished her Chequers plan and called it unworkable. The Chequers plan, one of the central tenets is to create a common rule book for goods and services crossing the Irish border to prevent a hard border from appearing between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. But the European Union rubbished those plans, saying that they would provide British companies with a competitive advantage and pose a threat to the European project. So this humiliation for Theresa May comes on the back of intense domestic criticism from within her own party and from without with regards to the government's position, the government's strategy for negotiating Brexit, which was, as we know, June 2016 was the referendum which 51.9% of the electorate voted in favour of leaving the European Union. Since then, the negotiations with the European Union have been very unfruitful and have weakened Theresa May's position within her party significantly. The hard Brexiteers that are represented by people like David Davis, who was the Minister for Brexit until the 9th of July this year, and Boris Johnson, who was the Foreign Minister, who also resigned over this Chequers proposal that the government adopted, are waiting in the wings, and Theresa May is feeling pressure from within her party and from within the European Union to deliver something. Otherwise there will be a no deal when Britain has to effectively withdraw from the European Union on the 29th of March 2019.
We thank Pablo for that report. At least one Palestinian has been killed and more than 50 injured by Israeli forces during a weekly demonstration near the Israeli-Gaza border. Our correspondent, Nayera Tardo, has the latest from Cairo.
We continue to follow the situation in Palestine and the Israeli army's constant aggression against the Palestinians. Just like every Friday, Palestinians have been demanding their right to return, as they have been since March 30th. However, the Israeli army has been stepping up its attack on the Palestinians, and that is why these protests are now happening almost every day. This week, 6 Palestinians have been killed, all of them young, including one aged 15. And every Monday, Palestinians have been gathering on the beach to demand the end of the sea blockade imposed in 2007. Because of this, the Israeli military coordinator in charge of the occupation of Palestinian territory said that if these protests on the coast continue, they will reduce the size of Gaza's permitted fishing zone. There is also a big crisis in Gaza's hospital because of the siege on the Palestinian territory. The hospitals may have to cut their services because of a lack of fuel and the growth in the number of injured, which has caused a shortage of medicines. Nikolai Maldonov, the UN Special Coordinator for Peace in the Middle East, warned in a report that the international community should help address the humanitarian needs of the Gaza Strip. This is because the UN doesn't have a budget for emergency fuel, and as a result, health centers are near to closing. He also said that the crisis is getting worse and it needs a political solution.
We thank Nayara for that report. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has said he is ready to hold talks with Israel. Abbas was speaking in Paris after meeting the French President Emmanuel Macron. They discussed funding for the Palestinian Refugee Agency after the United States cut its funding of over $200 million. Abbas clarified that he would talk to Israel at any time. The last peace talks collapsed in 2014 over the issue of Jewish settlements and other issues. The newly elected president of the Congress of South African Trade Unions, Singizwe has called on the government to immediately downgrade diplomatic relations with Israel. She said it was a show of support to the Palestinian people and a means to pressure Israel to end its occupation of Palestine.
We call on the South African government to implement the Nasrec resolution on the immediate and unconditional downgrade of the embassy in Tel Aviv. It is now more than 6 months since the withdrawal of our ambassador. We therefore call for the decisiveness on the part of the ANC government in this regard. Similarly, we believe that our government can do more to push back against the corrupt advances that Israel and Morocco are making within the African Union.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.